it is a blessing to have them here. So let's give a warm welcome and lots of love to Reverend Emile Gauvreau.
Thank you, Karen. All right. Infinite possibilities. I'm guessing that all of us at one time or another felt like there were no possibilities, that there was a way that we thought something was going to get done, and that path, whatever it might have been, sort of vaporized. It was gone. It was no longer there for us. And now we're sitting. I know I've been there, so I'll speak for myself, and you can relate if it's a situation you can relate to. Thinking, now what am I going to do? All is lost. I'm stuck. I can't move forward from this place. And then something happens. Something out of the blue. I read a book where they said, "Where is the blue?" We have these things out of the blue. As I got involved with Science of Mind, I started to understand that there was something happening way beyond my understanding. And I also didn't need to necessarily understand it or how it necessarily worked. I just needed to understand, and as Ernest Holmes says, there's a power for good in the universe, and we can use it. And the first time I heard that, I was like, really? You sure? And how do I use it? And the how really wasn't like, build this, build that, go this way, go that way, step into this, step into that, and now you've got your how, you've got your path, you've got your roadway, you're going to get there. No, I kept hearing surrender. Surrender? That's a white flag. I'm going to go hide. I can't do that. And then I was like, you need to do that. But I can't. You need to. But. And then I heard, and I was talking to Ron Frost earlier, and I can't remember where I heard this the first time, but the quote is, "The mere mortal mind has no business wondering how." And if you think about the idea of unlimited and limited, and the theme is get outside of your box, yes? The box. So what is the box? The box is our thinking that says there's only a certain number of ways, or maybe only one way, or whatever that might be for getting something done or getting from this place to that place. I noticed when I put the address this morning in my GPS to come here, at first I think tried to take me to your house. And I'm driving along and saying, this is not right. I've not driven this way before. So I had to actually pull off the road and put it in. And there were still 3 different ways to get here. And I was only 2 miles away. And I'm sure that if I wanted to be creative, there were probably another 3 to 6 ways I could probably have zigged and zagged and gotten to this location this morning. So there are possibilities. There are ways to do things. So when you start to step out of the box that we create for ourselves, we're all in a box of sorts. We've defined a life, the way our life works, the way things unfold, the way we get things done, the way we move through and do things. We have routines that we like to maintain. We feel uneasy when we don't get to do our whole routine. I had to fly to, I couldn't fly to Graham, Texas. I flew to Dallas-Fort Worth and then drove 2 hours to Graham, Texas. You can't probably find it on maps until you get to the little tiny town of 8,000 people. Anyway, I had to get up at 2:30 in the morning. I had to be in the car by 3:30 in the morning. I was on a flight at 6 a.m. It's like my routine, forget about it. The idea of getting up kind of leisurely, doing my retired life thing, and, maybe working out, before I have breakfast or after I have breakfast. No. I'm at the airport going through security, showing them my boarding pass and my driver's license and all that good stuff. So we define our life. Then something happens. Then we start to move through a situation, a circumstance, a set of circumstances, whatever it might be, and to determine how we might move through that to get to the quote-unquote other side, maybe get back to some level of normalcy. You ever notice that normal sort of never stays the same? That what's normal for you today might not even existed in your life a year ago? Or maybe it did, but in a different way. My wife and I are constantly marveling at, remember when we used to do, and we can list 3 or 4 things that was our pattern on a regular basis, and we like, when did we stop doing that? Why did we stop doing that? What did we discover about that? Or whatever it was. How come we just stopped and now we're doing whatever it is we're doing now? So when you start to step into other ways, and you get confronted with something and you say, how am I going to do this? And the non-intuitive answer is to surrender. Well, then the question that I had to ask her, what am I surrendering to? I'm surrendering to a bigger idea that maybe I don't even understand, a bigger idea of who I am, a bigger idea of what's happening in the world around me, a bigger idea of this concept of being one in the universe, of this infinite thing that we call God or Spirit or the universe or infinite love or joy or peace, whatever name you give it. And as Karen said in your opening prayer, we are unlimited. Within us, we embody that same unlimitedness. Because if we are created in the image and likeness of God, then we are imbued with, we embody the same characteristics and traits. One of the things that when I look back to my early Catholic upbringing, I kind of discovered after the fact that God had been created in the image and likeness of man, versus man being created in the image and likeness of God. So if you have God created in the image and likeness of man, becomes a very limited idea of what God is, a very limited idea of what's possible in the universe, a very limited picture of what can happen. Sometimes even petty and vengeful and all those other kinds of things. So we step out of that. We step into there's something bigger. There's something bigger. There's something that I can relax into. And relaxing into something when you're feeling very tense about getting something done is not the easiest thing to do. But with practice, we can do that. With meditation, with prayer. And I love what we have for prayer in Science of Mind, religious science. This idea that I early on I heard it was a technology, a scientific technology. And it didn't necessarily resonate, but as I started to understand, we're stepping into a place where we can tap into this bigger idea. We can tap into this other way of looking at things. When I was taking classes, one of my teachers, Reverend Nirvana Gale, who's since made his transition, was talking about not taking the same prayer or the same approach with every situation, even though it sounds like the same situation. And the story he told was he had a student or a counseling client who was a very accomplished pianist and songwriter and had not been able to write or even play for like 2 years. And after talking with this individual for a while, he suggested that he go home and meditate sitting on the piano bench with his hands poised above the keyboard. And after 1 or 2 sessions, in the middle of one of the sessions, he just started playing and started writing again and performing again and was launched out of the stuck place that he'd been in. And then he said about 2 years later, he had another person, very similar description, songwriter, performer, piano player. He said, oh, simple. Sent him home with meditating above the keyboard. Person came back 2 or 3 weeks later and said, nothing happened. You got, I got to get under this in a different way. I have to talk to this individual a different way, not just assume I know the answer just because it seemed like the same set of circumstances. And I think that struck me with the other thing, which is you might pray for the same circumstance in your life or someone else's life. As ministers and practitioners, we get asked to pray for people pretty regularly. I always remember that one Sunday that this couple that he was our music director at the time said, "We're selling our house and we really want to sell it fast. Will you do a treatment with us?" And I said, "Certainly." And somewhere in the course of starting that treatment, and I always love this, it's just, what you're going to say comes to you after you've opened your mouth. I said something to the effect that the perfect buyer for their home had already gotten in the car and was driving around Cape Coral looking for their house, and it was the perfect house, and the timing was perfect, so on and so forth. They called me the next day and said it had gone under contract at 6 p.m. that same day. I was pretty impressed. I tried not to get too impressed with me. I was trying to be impressed with prayer. And then about a year and a half later, same thing happened. They said they had bought they had a rental house and they were selling that. I said, okay, and remembering the lesson I learned, I'm not going to go to that same place that the perfect person has already gotten in the car or whatever, because that comes up. You're kind of looking at the same situation. And I started again. And I can't really remember what I said, but I didn't say the same thing. And they called me, I think it was Wednesday of that week, and they said, well, we're a little disappointed. It took until Monday evening. Now, what I know is they were open to the possibility of that house selling quickly. They believed that whatever I was going to say was going to move the energy of the universe in the direction of them selling their home. If they had listened to me thinking, it isn't going to work, they'd probably still have that house. And in practitioner class, there's always the question that we ask is like, how often do you pray with someone who's got a situation that they're trying to move out of? And the answer basically is until they move out of it. And do you do the same prayer? No. Because you're going to listen to that person each time and hear where they are and how they might need to move. Because we're moving in a possibility of a universe that's constantly shifting within with unlimited possibility of how each situation can be resolved. We're not looking for the solution. When we stop, when you start to think about how you're going to do something, sell something that you own, buy something new, find something you're going to replace, relationship, you come up with whatever the circumstance is. And if you start defining the how of it, how I'm going to get this done, how it's going to unfold, you just think about it. If you've got a big block of wood representing the universe of possibilities of how something can happen, and then suddenly you decide you're going to define the one how that's going to work. It's like taking a splinter off of that block and saying, that's it. It's got to fit into there. And what about all the millions of splinters that are still in the block that could be the way it's going to unfold? Do you ever notice when you do get to that point of surrendering into a way of something resolving itself in your life or the life that's surrounding you, that sometimes the solution isn't even something that was on your radar when you started? But it got done, and everything is even better. Even better. That's what I've noticed. It seems like it's an even better solution than any of the ones I imagined. And you start to get a sense of, oh, there's so much more here than I can even think of. So my work then becomes this idea of surrendering into the power of the word that we speak, the power of the universe, the infinite nature of the universe, the infinite nature of God. God is eternal and infinite. Always has been, always will be. Infinite beyond what we can even imagine, right? So if we've got that as the starting place and that we're part of that, back to Catholicism in a lot of places, they talk about, you get your eternal life when you die. Well, not if you're created in the image and likeness. We started as eternal beings. So, the possibilities of what that looks like is mind-boggling. Were we here before? Were we here in another form? We're going to be somewhere else in another form. Ernest Holmes says he believed that we are eternal beings, and surely that there are higher and lower levels of consciousness that we can attain to over time. I always thought that was kind of interesting. I don't necessarily know that I can understand that or wrap my head around what that might look like, but I know that as we move through and do things, things present themselves to us for ways to do things. So as I surrender into this idea, if I surrender into what I learned to call in my coursework and learning, a field of prayer. So you can create a field of prayer around yourself. What does that field of prayer look like? It looks like I am recognizing the infinite nature of spirit that's surrounding me all the time. It's always there, always has been, always will be, and it's there. And I love this. And some people look at me as conspiring. You're really talking about the universe or God conspiring for you good? I said, for me, that means that there's this thought activity, this wonderful thing in thought that's unfolding all the time, and looking for ways to blend with what I'm doing and blend into a solution that unfolds for me in some beautiful way. So as we recognize that wholeness and that perfection that is the infinite nature of spirit that is everywhere, and it's also as you. Each and every one of you, each and every one of us, it's in there. When we have somebody that presents with some sort of health condition, what I learned to know is that condition is, number one, temporary because it's a condition, and number two, it's not their true nature. Your true nature is perfect. Your true nature is the perfection of God. Your true nature is that which is seeking to emerge from you in every moment. So whatever it looks like today, whether there's confusion or ill health in some manner or another, there's the possibility waiting on the other side of that not being who you are. I had been diagnosed with high blood pressure, I think it was around 1999. And shortly thereafter, I entered practitioner training and dutifully taken the medication. And then one day, can't remember, 2 or 3 years later, I said, wait a minute, I'm a practitioner. I'm now in ministerial school, and I've learned all this stuff about prayer, about possibility, about not defining myself as a condition that I have. What do we say? I have high blood pressure. I have, you fill in the blank if you've got one of the things. Or, which is basically saying, I am that. And about the same time, I had an appointment with my primary care doctor, and I sat down with him, and I said, I'd like to get off this medication. And I was on a small dose. And he said, okay, that works for me. He says, let's take 6 months. You come back in 6 months. Let's see how you're doing. You do whatever you think will work. So I kind of amped up my meditation practice. I was more concentrated in my prayer work around this. I did some Ayurvedic healing processes and so on and so forth. And at the time, I had seen him, and he said, go ahead and try something. I think, with the medication, my pressure was like 130 over 80 or 89. Just kind of, today 130 would be outrageously high, because they lowered the standard since then. I went in for that 6-month check. It was 106 over 72. And he said, ooh, we've poisoned you really well. Stop taking that, and he used a word I won't use here. But as I look back at that, what I recognize is I stopped defining myself as someone that had a condition. And if you look at your life, whether it's your economics, your relationship, your health, whatever it might be, the box that we're stuck in, if we're stuck, is the one we've defined with our words and our thoughts. And if we're not happy with that, the solution is, and Ernest Holmes says this more and more, many times in his works, it's simple but not easy. So it's simple to kind of recognize, simple to understand what we put in place, but it's not easy to move out of those patterns. We're surrounded with people who've defined us in whatever way we've presented ourselves. They've come to accept us that way, and family members might even be the worst because, like, what, you're going to change? You're going to move? We've been in Florida 11 years now. Our second daughter still says, "When are you coming home?" It's like, I think we're home. Got a place to go to, after the day is done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you're not home here. Well, that's what you're defining as my home, but that's not our home. So when we start to move out of those definitions and start to think about sort of breaking through to the other side, breaking into the bigger picture, we need to do what is not easy, which is to turn off the inner voices that are saying, "You've never done that before. You sure you want to do that? How are you going to do that? How? You notice how is the one that comes up. And how is the biggest builder of boxes, the biggest eliminator of possibility when we try to answer the question that I think we have. Because when you try to answer that question of how am I going to do this, what do you have to do? You have to limit your thinking. You have to bring it down to some sort of finite set of things that you might do. And when that happens, now you've taken infinite and made it extremely finite. Now, being in the infinite can be scary. Being in the infinite can be a place of, I don't understand this, I don't know what to do next. You sure it's safe out there? On the other hand, when we have this idea that we can rest and relax into the infinite God, the infinite spirit, the infinite universe, that thing that is there for us all the time, we relax into a space that says, it's okay. It's okay. You can do this. It's okay. You can let go. And you ever hear, I think it was in the song, let go and let God. What an idea. And let go and let God, a lot of us early on in our studies and are hearing this message, let go and let God kind of sounded like, well, I'm just going to let it go. I'm just, that's it. The people that Agape has a wonderful prayer line, and one of the things that we got to do, initially it looked like had to do, and then as we got to do it, it was like, do I get to go again? It's to serve in the prayer ministry and answer the phone lines. And I tell you what, if you've ever have the opportunity to sit in, it was 2 to 4 hour blocks. One time I was in there, and in about 2.5 hours, I had 22 calls. I think I was 6 inches off the ground as I went back out to my car. I mean, just to have in the space of creating that energy. But the people that would call and they're looking for a job, and you ask a couple of questions, try to get the circumstance. Well, what are you doing? I said, well, I let go and I'm letting God. Have you opened a newspaper? Have you looked online? Have you maybe submitted an application? No. So how is anybody going to know you're looking for a job besides you're letting go and letting God? So sometimes we have to move in the direction. In the Henry David Thoreau, and I can't do the whole quote, but it starts with something to the effect of when one moves positively in the direction of. Well, what might that be? If you're interested in a relationship, maybe you want to go somewhere where you're going to meet new people. If you're interested in a new job, you might start researching what that job might look like and start to define a picture of what it might be. the idea of making a list of these are the kinds of things I would like in a life partner, in a job, in a new place I might want to live, so on and so forth. What I want my financial circumstance to look like starts to create the prayer that's going to be spoken through you on a regular basis. And when we start to talk about the possibility and define the openness of the possibility of this universe that is yours now, it's not off there somewhere in the future. We all have it right now, and our work is to step into it. Stepping into it by stepping out of the limited way we've been thinking about it. That it can only show up in ABC manner, but that there's an infinite way it can show up. It can move us into another way. So as you do that work of stepping into the infinite, that just sounds... I've said it so many times, it doesn't sound scary to me anymore, but the first few times I said that, it's like, really? So we're stepping into a bigger idea of what God is, a bigger idea of what we are within this thing we call God, a bigger idea of what our lives can be, and a opportunity to move beyond any of our prior limited thinking. And yes, from day to day you will have limited thinking. The idea is to move back out of the limited into the unlimited. So as you go about your business, as you start to encounter things, as you start to think about something you might want to change or improve in some way or another, think about the infinite number of ways that can happen that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to try to figure out where all those resources are going to come from. You don't have to think about how you're going to get rid of the things you no longer want. You just need to think about what it is you do want to see. And that to me is some people call it the what. What is the what of your life? What is that? How does it look? How would it feel? How would you enjoy it? And I would leave you with that idea. As you start to think about any of these things, the idea of what you would like it to be needs to be your dominant thought. We don't want to be dominated by the thought of what we don't want it to be. We are with the thought of what we do want it to be. Just quick, simple story. The reason I was in Graham, Texas, partners and I bought a 63-unit apartment complex there at the end of 2004, and became time to sell it. Talked with a real estate broker friend of mine there who I've known virtually all that time. He says, well, it's in a tertiary market, which means it's out in the sticks. And, you're not going to get as much money for it as if it was in Fort Worth or Dallas. I knew that. And it could take 6 months to a year to sell it. And at first I was like, 6 months to a year, that's going to be painful. And then I thought, wait a minute, you know this other stuff. So I started having the thought, similar to when my friends Pat and Jim said, we really want to sell our house fast. I thought, what if it sold really quickly? What if it wasn't 6 months? What if it was less than 1 or 2 or 3 months? Do you know we got an offer before it was even listed? It took 15 days to negotiate the final purchase contract, but the escrow period is going to be 40 days. So it doesn't sound like it's not even 2 months. So the possibility when we get out of our own way of what can or cannot happen opens huge doors. So go forth and open huge doors for yourselves in your life today. Release whatever it is that might be, holding you back. and step into the big possibility of God in you, as you, through you, and for you. Love and blessings.
Thank you.